you're in New York, and so you're probably familiar with the fact that there is a group working on this at Mount Sinai, saying we're going to, based on this TMAO stuff, we're just going to remove the animals from the heart failure diet and see what happens. And this was, I don't believe it's a full publication yet, but it came out at the American Heart Association. Dr. Lara, it got a lot of press coverage that people with heart failure who were eating a vegetable diet had a 28% reduction in the risk of developing symptomatic heart failure and admissions, and it has an impact on mortality. Now, if you weren't convinced by now that you shouldn't be eating animal products and red meat, you'll love this one. This is a young man at the Karolinska, and I pulled this one up because it was so remarkable, published a year ago, and I was just staring at this graph. This is the number of articles saying that meat is bad for you, published in 1970 and 75, and it gradually increased until the last year before we published this. It was 450 articles. If that isn't a massive amount of data that should be changing people's behavior, I mean, what is? And so he actually read them all, okay, and summarized statistically what the effect of meat versus processed red meat is on the things that we think we could avoid by not doing that. That's diabetes, stroke, and that's both ischemic stroke, that's where the blood flow is down because of a clot usually, or hemorrhagic stroke, where the blood vessel has broken. Coronary heart disease, heart failure, male and female, and all of them were associated with meat intake. And the very, very worst was processed red meat association with coronary heart disease. Again, very different data set, still very true. This one you can't read, but he's trying to take one graph and put all of the things that make you die from eating meat. And I just want to pick on a couple. One of I talked about already, which is TMAO. But the other one that I think now is probably in first place statistically would be heme iron. Now, this article talks about in the NIH study, AARP health study, well, they're talking about heme iron, nitrates and nitrites. Those two, you'll recognize, those are components of processed red meat. They make the really dying, decaying flesh look bright and attractive to some people, okay? But it's the heme iron that is probably even more concerning. That is, people are told you must eat meat so that you have enough iron. Well, that iron happens to be toxic. It actually heme iron produces what's called reactive oxygen species. Not true if you're getting it from a vegetable source. That is probably responsible for all of the correlations between high iron in the bloodstream and heart attack, which we found from Finland, 30, 40 years ago. And so, yeah, the people with the highest level of iron, double the heart attack rate. So the mechanism that's been discovered is that those reactive oxygen species make plaques and then upset the macrophages inside the plaques, so that they are more likely to become a vulnerable plaque and have a heart attack occur. Now, as I'm closing, I want to really talk about some of the social aspects and how this really, we need to crowdsource this. I'm glad you're here. Hopefully you'll talk about this with all your friends. You become an ambassador for plant-based nutrition and for health. All right, fantastic. I took this one personally. A lot of you heard about this, but the president of AHA became a friend of mine during about 6 weeks before this. I was on my last ACC presidential team trip, and we were sitting having sort of a impromptu presidential dinner. I got one of my best friends happens to be president of the European Society of Cardiology right now. Then we had the past president of the AHA, and then I had the current president. And these two guys are eating seafood. I'm eating tofu, okay? And he's eating a steak. And I'm saying, you heard my lecture. Did I stutter? Well, I mean, you're eating this. And he said, I'm from Texas. This is what we do. I have bad family history, but, I'm taking my statin. So 6 weeks later, I know what it is. I know what it's like. Been there at the American College of Cardiology, speaking in front of 5,000 people, trying to get your message across, trying to get a message that they're not familiar with in terms of prevention. And so I know how you get amped up for it. And there he was giving the opening address, and he had a heart attack. And so everyone's all over this, you know, heart attack at the American Heart Association with the president and all this stuff, and not thinking that the real issue is that we just don't know. We don't know all this stuff. Nobody's paying attention to it, and we need to do a much better job of getting the word out. I feel like this is where we were. We were here in the 1950s. This was a physician. They were talking about his lifestyle and all these things, and what are they doing? More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette, okay? That's what we were doing in the 1940s and 50s. And then enough research, is it 450 articles per year about meat? What does it take to, in this case, get the Surgeon General in 1964 to say, we're putting a warning label? That had a tremendous impact. And then you have places like New York who says you're not going to smoke in public places. And then that spread to Chicago and other places, and the heart attack rate drops, okay? So we need to put a warning label on every animal that is produced. Okay. So I like to brag about Rush University. It's a beautiful hospital, by the way, and the 12.75 is the number of vegan cardiologists that I have, and